Hi friends, it's Deanna here today, and today we are sewing up the Batwing tunic and dress pattern. Super cute, super great for spring and summer and all those different seasons. It would be awesome for taking a trip, going on a getaway, or just to lounge around in. It is super cute with the tunic length, but it's also beautiful with the longer dress length. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Before I get started though, let me remind you about our Fun Fan giveaway of $50 Ellie and my gift certificate. And all you have to do is subscribe to our channel and comment below so you can be entered to our giveaway. So let's go ahead and get started. I've already cut out all my pieces, and this is a woven pattern, which means that this will be done with a non-stretch fabric. So all this can be done with a sewing machine or a serger, either one. If you're using your sewing machine though, a lot of times I'll tell you to go ahead and finish your edges, your raw edges with a zigzag stitch, because the one thing about these non-stretch fabrics, the woven fabrics, is that they can start fraying and you don't want them to fray. So that's why we usually finish our raw edges. So I'm grabbing one of my pieces, my front, and you're gonna put it face up. And I'm going to grab my back and I'm gonna put it face down right on top of it at the shoulder seams. So we're gonna go ahead and pair those shoulder seams together, and we are going to sew them together. And I have a band-aid on because I cut my finger. I didn't do it on a rotary cutter. I did it with my scissors. Usually it's always the rotary cutter that gets me. No, it was my scissors. I was literally cutting something. I had my finger right there. I cut and it went and I clipped my finger. Like I literally cut my finger with scissors. Like, how does that even happen? Anyway, so we're gonna go ahead and sew those shoulder seams together. I am going to use my serger because I like the fact that my serger just gives me a finished edge. But if you don't want to use your serger and you want to use your sewing machine, that's fine. I would advise you to do a stretch stitch on the edge, a zigzag stitch, to finish up those raw edges. All right, so now once those shoulder seams are sewn, we're going to open them up and we're going to steam them. And then we're going to hem that side. Okay, that's like your arm side, your side of your arm. Here's your neck hole. Here's the side. And you can do it a couple different ways. So you can fold a 1/4 inch down and then another 1/4 inch down and just top stitch. You can sew your raw edge with a serger and then fold by a 1/2 inch and go ahead and sew it. Or you can do your cover stitch. I am going to go ahead and serge that raw edge. And after I serge that raw edge, I'm gonna grab it and fold it 1/2 inch in to give it a hem. So the reason why I like to serge is because then now I have that raw edge is all serged up, so it's not going to fray on me. But if you do a 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch, I mean a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch, that will work just fine. So now I'm gonna go back in and top stitch and hem it. All right, so now it's been hemmed. I'm gonna go ahead and steam that hem. Make it nice and straight. So the back of the hem is that serged edge, okay? So now I already did it on my other side as well. And we're gonna grab our bodice. We're gonna fold it right sides together, right on top of each other. So this is the wrong side is showing, the right side is in there. And we're gonna go to our side. So this is the part that we already hemmed, right? And that's the sleeve. This is gonna be your armhole right here. And then right at that corner, before you get to the waistline, so here's my waistline, but there's this little piece that's kind of sideways. You're gonna match up the front and the back together, and you're going to sew that together. That's like your side seam, okay? Now, if you are not quite sure where to start or where to stop, you can look at your pattern piece and there is a line that shows you where it's at, but it's just the sides. So there's one side, and we're gonna do the same for the other side, and then I'm gonna show it to you in just a minute what those two sides are. And you're gonna put them right sides together and sew it together. Okay, so here's my top. They're right sides together. Right here at the corner where my arm stops, my arm side, this is where we already hemmed. There is this little side that goes shoop. We're gonna sew just that little raw edge right there together, from right here, from where the sleeve ends to the waistline. So we're gonna go ahead and sew that together. I am serging, so if you are sewing on your sewing machine, make sure you zigzag those edges, those raw edges. All right, so now that my shoulder seams are sewn, I will have, side seams, I will have this little strap right here. What I usually do is I fold it right over the seam, and I go in with a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine and zigzag stitch that right on. Later I have to remember that I have a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine and change it to whatever stitch I have to do, but it will, you do the zigzag over it, and then when you open it, you trim you gotta trim it all off, and then when you open it, it's not even there. I mean, there's a little hair right there that I gotta trim again, but it is covered up. So there it is. Our bodice is coming together. All right. So now we're gonna work on those back straps, so that way your bodice doesn't slide right off your shoulders. Okay, so here we go. I've got my strap. I'm gonna grab it. I'm gonna fold it wrong sides together at the middle. Actually, first I'm gonna fold that raw edge on the short side. I'm gonna fold that in 1/4 inch. Okay, so now I'm going to fold it wrong sides together down the middle, making sure that folded side at the top is still down. Okay, and I'm going to steam and give it a memory crease right down the middle, raw edges touching at the one side. Then I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna have that middle crease, and now on that middle crease, I'm going to fold the two sides right to that middle crease. So I'm creating a binding. That's what I'm, basically doing. So you really could do this if you had some binding you wanted to do, something cool like some lace or something for the back. You could definitely just use that. It would be great. Okay, some fabrics, this is easier done than others. This fabric is trying to stand up and not listen to me. So got it. So now we fold the two sides to the middle, and now we're gonna grab it and fold it right sides together. Those two sides that we just folded to the middle, they're gonna get sandwiched in. So you have that steam down the middle, that line down the middle. You fold this top line 1/4 inch, make that half line, open it back up, bring those two sides right to the middle, to that middle line, meet right at the middle, and then fold together to create the strap. And now I'm gonna go in and sew with a straight stitch down over and all the way down to keep it closed. And I'm doing that with both straps. Oh, see, gotta change it to a straight stitch. If you have a problem getting started at the beginning, what I sometimes do is I'll grab a pin and I'll place it right at the top of my fabric to help guide my fabric as it's going through my sewing machine. All right, so now I finished my straps. I did the same thing for both of my straps. I'm going to grab my bodice and I put it face up on my board, and I'm gonna go from my shoulder seam, from the top of my shoulder. I'm going to grab and I'm going to measure down 2.5 inches from the shoulder seam. So here's my shoulder seam right here and right here. I'm gonna measure 2.5 inches down. and I am going to place my strap right sides together. The raw edge, the one that didn't fold, that we didn't fold down, is gonna go right on top, right there, and it's right sides together, and I'm gonna pin it first, and then we're gonna go ahead and baste it on to that one side. So again, from the shoulder, 2.5 inches, put my strap on, right sides together, and pin, and I am going to go ahead and baste it on. Now for basting, I'm just using the longest straight stitch on my sewing machine, and I'm just going to have that on so that when I go to sew my my facing on, my strap will get caught in between. So I did it for one, and I'm going to do it for the other one as well. Okay, you don't need to catch your 2 layers. You just catch 1 layer, and there it is. So that way, when I remove my pins and when I go to sew it all on, my straps are hanging there. They're not falling down. They will be sitting there waiting for me to do the neck binding. Now we're gonna move on to the neck binding, and it is advised that you use some interfacing, some light interfacing on these bands, on the neck band, on the facing, so that way it gives it a little bit more stability. So I'm gonna put this facing on the wrong side of both of my pieces. And you just do it however your interfacing tells you to do it. Mine is just iron on, and I'm just ironing it on straight onto my piece. Okay. And as you can tell, I didn't cut it very well. There's a little bit of edging at the sides. That's okay, because when I go to sew it, it will eat it up. It will eat those little bits off. So I did the same thing. I put some interfacing on my other one as well. And I'm gonna place them right sides together. And I'm gonna sew those raw edges, short raw edges together to make it one neck piece. One neck piece. Okay, I'm gonna sew those raw edges together at the top. There was one side. Here goes the second side. And now after I do that, I'm gonna open it, and I'm going to sew all around the outside edge to finish that that facing, because you don't want it to fray on you. So you can either do a zigzag stitch or your serger all the way around the outside. The inside's gonna be attached to the bodice, but the outside needs to be sewn, the raw edges, that way it doesn't fray on you. You see it's already kind of starting to fray right there. You don't want that happening, and then, you know, your garment might be ruined. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew those raw edges all the way around. All right, so now it's been all the way around. Let me steam that down. My iron is not, I think it needs some more water. It's not steaming as nicely. So I'm gonna add some more water to that in a minute, but I'm just going all the way around, making sure that is nice and straight. And here it is. It's all serged on the outside. That raw edge has been serged. I'm going to go ahead and grab my bodice. I'm gonna turn it inside out. Okay. And I am going to meet I'm gonna put this right side out, and I'm going to fit it right into my bodice to touch the raw edges together, the right sides together. So where the V is, I'm going to match them right sides together right here at that V. Okay, I'm gonna match right here at the shoulder seam together. I'm gonna match at the other V. This is the inside of that facing, not the side that we just serged, but the other side, the inside, the raw edge. Okay. So now it's in there. As you can see, the raw edge is in there. You can go ahead and sew it all the way around. If you're doing a a serger on it, you gotta be careful when you get to the V to go down and up without using the serging knife so it doesn't cut it. Or you can make it more rounded. If you just want to use the serger and you're like, I don't want to bother with it, I'm just gonna make it more rounded, you can do that. Or you can go in 1/4 of an inch and with your sewing machine sew the V right there, and then come around with your serger and kind of just graze it when you're going through that V, so that the sewing machine V will be there, and then it'll just be like a serged, barely serged right there, but don't cut the thread. So I'm going to just go ahead and do it on my sewing machine so that it can have a nicer V. And we're gonna top stitch it once we fold it, so I think you'll be fine. So I'm gonna do it on my sewing machine with a straight stitch. All the way around, attaching both of those together and making sure that you're attaching that strap, but you're not catching it out. So put it out of the way as you're going around it. All right, so now I have gone all the way around. And now what you can do is, if you have pinning scissors, you can go ahead and cut around the V. I don't, so I'm just gonna go close to the thread on that V and just kind of do a couple clippings so the V will open up real nicely. Now don't cut the thread. You're not cutting the thread, you're just cutting the fabric so it'll kind of move around with the thread, but don't cut the thread or it will come apart. You don't want that. And now you're gonna tuck that in, that facing in. Turn it right side out and tuck that facing into the dress. And then you're gonna go through and steam it all the way around. So now you got that neck facing. I'm going to steam it all the way around. And after you steam it all the way around, then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch it down. There's my strap, it got caught in there. You can go ahead and remove that basting stitch of my strap and keep steaming all the way around. Probably fit it into your ironing board like so, which makes it steaming process a whole lot easier. And then after you steam it all the way around, then you're going to go ahead and top stitch that raw edge. So I'm gonna go, not raw edge, top stitch that whole edge. Top stitch it all the way around. My strap is over here, should be back here. So there's my strap in the back. I'm gonna tie it so you can see it, how cute it looks. Okay, there's my strap. And here's my front. And I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch all the way around. And I'm also going to top stitch, see where that shoulder seam is? I'm gonna top stitch right on that shoulder seam so that the facing doesn't come out. So I'm gonna top stitch the shoulder seams and top stitch all the way around the whole neck. So let's do that, and then we'll work on our skirt because our bodice is done. If you really wanted just a cute crop, you could just really go ahead and hem it and it would be super cute. Wouldn't that be super cute? And that would be all you have to do. But let me go ahead and top stitch and then we'll come back and finish our skirt and attach it to our bodice. All right, so once you've already top stitched, we're gonna grab our skirts. If you are making the knee or long version, the knee or the what is it called? The knee or the ankle. Yeah, that's what it is. Skirt. You will have made 4 different panels for your skirt. So what we're going to do is we're going to meet them up together, right sides together, and we're going to sew that side seam. So the straight side seam. That's not straight right there. This is straight right here. So you're going to sew the straight side seam, right sides together to make it one front panel and one back panel. If you're making the tunic or you're making the mini, then you will have just the one panel for the front and the one panel for the back. So we're gonna go ahead and sew that together to become one solid panel. And we sewed it together at that solid straight line. So once that is sewn together, we're gonna open it, and I wanna steam that seam to flatten it out. And now I've got one solid skirt. And because of my matching my stripes and everything, you can't even tell it's two panels. It's just one front panel. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab the bottom where the points are. That's my bottom of my dress. I'm going to hem the bottom. And you can do, there's a couple of ways you can do hemming. We've already kind of talked about them. You can do a 1/4 inch fold up, 1/4 inch fold up, and top stitch. You can serge that raw edge all the way around and then fold it up and top stitch, hem. Or with mine, since I have a cover stitch, then I am going to use my cover stitch to hem this dress. So I'm gonna go ahead and hem all the bottom. So it's a 1/2 inch allowance, and we're hemming all the way around the bottom of the skirt. All right, once you've hemmed it, I wanna go ahead and steam that hem to make it nice and flat and pretty looking. So, okay, I'll show you my hem. Okay, so now we're gonna grab our front skirt and back skirt, and we're gonna meet it at the sides, the side seams, right sides together. And we're going to put this skirt together. So those right sides are gonna be meeting. Where's my tomato? Right sides together, meeting at that raw edge. So we're gonna put this skirt together. Okay, there's one side, and then the other side. And I'm going to sew those two sides together. Okay, so let's sew them together. All right, once it's sewn together, just like when we had the sleeves, you may have that serger tail hanging out. You might want to put it right over that seam like I did earlier and zigzag stitch it on. Just that seam area. That's all I'm doing. And then I'm going to trim all the little pieces of thread, the rest of the tail, and it is tucked in there nice and tight so it won't come off. You can see it right there, but once it steams down, you can't even see it. I know they don't match. Oh well. The front will match, so it will look nicer. Okay, so now what we're going to do is our skirt is already basically quartered because you have the two back seams. If you have, if you're making the midi or the midi or the tunic, then you will want to quarter the back. Find that back edge, and what you do is you'll grab the two seams, the two side seams, and go to the back and go to the front and mark it. I usually mark it by doing like a little clip off, but you can, if you don't want to do that, you can just pin it or whatever. I'm going to turn the bodice inside out. Okay. Or you can turn either the bodice or the skirt inside out. It really doesn't matter. And then the other one, whatever you didn't turn inside out, you're going to fit it right inside. Let me make sure it's right. So those are this is the sides. Remember, the points go to the side. So you want to make sure that the front is where you want the front and the back is where you want the back. And now I'm gonna match all those quarter seams. The marks I just made and the seams I have on all the things. Okay, so I made the mark in the front, and here's the front seam. So I'm gonna match it right there. Then I have my side seam, right sides together, matching. And then my back seam and my mark that I made. And then my last seam. So now they are together, right sides together. Okay, now you are going to need a 1/2 inch seam allowance right here. So what you can do is you can go ahead and serge that, and don't cut any excess because you're gonna need it, or just go ahead and zigzag stitch at the end, because then once that's done, you're going to flip that seam, seam allowance up. You're gonna flip it up and you're gonna top stitch, and that's going to become your casing. So you don't wanna cut too much of the seam off with the serger, so you can just barely do it or do it with a zigzag stitch. It is up to you. So we're just attaching the 2 raw edges. Now, if you want to pin more, that way your fabric doesn't slide down, I might put a couple more pins because my fabric is very slippery. And it might slide down and make my seam not be very good. You need that 1/2 inch seam allowance because you need it because it's gonna be your casing once we go to encase that elastic, and we'll be done. Honestly, these are the last 2 steps we have. We're gonna sew this together, then make that casing and attach the elastic, and we're done. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want that 1/2 inch allowance. So you're gonna use your sewing machine and you're gonna go in 1/2 inch and sew all the way around to give you that 1/2 inch allowance. So let's go ahead and sew it all the way around with that 1/2 inch allowance. And then once we do that 1/2 inch allowance, you can go ahead and zigzag stitch that raw edge, but don't take out the 1/2 inch allowance because you're gonna need that for your casing. So let's go ahead and sew it together. All right, once you've made that 1/2 inch allowance, you can go ahead and use a zigzag stitch or something to finish up that raw edge. But don't take off too much of that seam allowance because you need the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you sew that raw edge, we're going to open it and make that seam. Whoops. There we go. Open it and make that seam go up towards the top, that seam, that casing. Okay, what you can do is, if you don't want to do stitch it and all that, if you're going to zigzag stitch it anyway, you can go ahead. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and zigzag stitch that top of that seam allowance down. So I'm going to be creating that casing with my zigzag stitch, and you know, you might be able to see that zigzag stitch on the other side. So if you don't like that look, then you might want to go ahead and zigzag stitch that raw edge first, and then just top stitch that seam allowance. But you want to leave at least a 1 to 2 inch gap, so that way you can fit your elastic through there. So I'm just gonna go in and do a zigzag stitch and connect the raw edge, and I put it towards the bodice to create a casing all the way around. All right, so I went all the way around. Can you see my zigzag stitch right there at the top? Leaving a gap right there. So I'm gonna grab a bobby pin, and I'm going, safety pin, I'm sorry. Bobby pin wouldn't do anything. A safety pin, and I'm gonna pin it to the one side of the elastic. And I'm gonna go right in that that inch gap, and I'm gonna go right through that seam allowance I just made, that casing I just made, and I'm gonna feed this bobby pin and this elastic all the way around that waist. So I'm gonna go all the way around, and then when I come back to the other side, I'm going to sew it together. So let me go all the way around, and then we'll come back to sew it together, and we'll be done. All right, so once it's come out the other side, I'm going to remove the pin. I'm going to grab both sides and put them together and overlap them and zigzag stitch them together. I just go back and forth with my zigzag stitch, and then trim all the excess because my sewing machine had a lot of excess thread right there. Okay, and mine didn't look it's not completely even. It kind of turned a little bit, but that's okay. They're attached together. Then you're going to go ahead and let it go all the way in. Stretch it all out. Go back to the spot where you left the gap. Where was that? Okay, right here. And then go ahead and sew top stitch, zigzag stitch right over that, or top stitch if you didn't do the zigzag stitch like I did. And close that gap. And then I'm gonna turn it around. And my dress is finished. I untied my ties because I didn't want to catch them while I was sewing. So I untied them so I could move them out of the way. Start it back up. Do you ever end up with thread all over you when you're done with a project? It's like, where all this thread come from? Okay, here is my dress. And obviously it needs to be, the gathers need to be fixed so that it's even. The elastic, ooh, some of this, trim some of these threads. My sewing machine right there where I made the when I closed up the gap, it went all crazy right there. So I'm even out all that elastic because it's all stuck on one side. The one really good thing about doing it with the elastic is then you don't have to be precise, like you're not gathering, you're just putting the elastic right there. And my dress is finished. How pretty is this? Oh, I love it. How cute. I'm gonna take a picture of it so you can see it better. I hope you enjoyed this sew along. Please let me know if you have any questions about anything that I did. Maybe it's something that you maybe didn't understand. Post it below and I will be glad to help you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Please comment, like, share, subscribe to our channel for a chance to win. Come visit us on Facebook or Instagram. I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you all next time. Bye.